Hey, thank you so much for joining the show. Before we get started, I want you to make sure that you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to the Sara Carter Show. You can find me on YouTube as well. And don't forget, on Rumble. A lot of you are going to Rumble now. We can talk freely there. I don't have to worry about China stopping me from doing a story like the one with Yoko Ishii that they didn't like and being demonetized on YouTube. So go to Rumble. Also, make sure to follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Parler. Parler is coming back. You can get all those links at SaraACarter.com. That's SaraACarter.com, where you are going to find the latest stories and our newsletter. That's where you can sign up, and we will make sure that you will get the latest stories and the stories that you care about most. Look, today is going to be a great day. We have Congressman Andy Biggs. I think he is probably one of the most important members of Congress. He's not afraid to stand up. He's to the administration, even if it was the Trump administration. He's a fighter for border security. He absolutely understands this. His state of Arizona has had a number of issues when it comes to border security and protecting the U.S. border. And he's one of the men that goes out there for himself, talks to the Border Patrol agents, talks to the Immigration and Customs Enforcement officers, and finds out what's really happening. He doesn't play games. He's going to be on the show today. And we are going to talk about the insanity of the Biden administration in changing and overturning so many of the Trump administration's laws and regulations when it came to the U.S.-Mexico border, things that I believed actually helped our nation, protected not only us, but protected the people to the south, our neighbors to our south, whether that's our neighbors from Honduras or Guatemala, El Salvador, Mexico. This is about taking care of people. This is a humanitarian crisis. That's what this is at the border. And I'm going to explain why the only winners here are the criminals and what's happening in our country. The big breaking stories about how ICE is actually was going to let criminals back out into our streets. I believe that they already have. I don't think that the Associated Press story is 100% accurate. I'm going to explain all of that to you and more with Congressman Andy Biggs on the show. And I'm going to take you to the border, folks. I've been there a lot. I've spent my career there. I started out covering the border in 2004, 2005. So I'll take you there. But first, I want to talk to you about an organization that I absolutely love, one that I believe in, and one that sponsors the Sara Carter Show. Because why? Because they care about freedom, they care about America, and they want you to have the facts. And that is AMAC, the Association for Mature American Citizens. With the Biden administration now in power, the battle for the integrity of America has never been bigger. This is a big fight, folks, and this is how you can make a difference. You can join AMAC today. Join the Association for Mature American Citizens. AMAC believes in the same values you and I believe in: faith, family, freedom. I know you believe in that. They are the alternative to about everything that AARP offers and stands for, right? They are the exact opposite, but without the liberal agenda that AARP gives. This is about a conservative group that's going to fight for you. Stand with us by becoming an AMAC member today. I stand with AMAC. I hope that you will too. I encourage you to join today at amac.us/Carter. That's amac.us/Carter. The benefits of membership are great, but the cause is even greater. Join amac.us/Carter. So let's start. Let's start with the top story this week on immigration. And that was that ICE almost released child sex offenders after the Biden immigration policy change. I want you to listen to this story because the story it's not the complete story. It is true that there were some sex offenders that were almost released publicly. You have whistleblowers inside ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, that are like, look, we can't do this. This is unacceptable. We can't be just releasing people from prison that are illegal immigrants that are gone to jail for molesting children, right? An attempted molestation, and then just kick them back out onto the streets of America and not send them back home. What kind of insanity is this? Well, let me tell you, this has been happening. What happens is it starts at the top. Department of Homeland Security officials trying to push forward the policies that the Biden administration wants in place They don't even think these things through, folks. They don't even care. They don't even care. Why? Because just look at Washington, D.C. right now. 25,000 National Guard troops, a huge fence around the Capitol. They're all worried about Americans, that might be insurgents, but they're not even worried about the fact that they're going to let criminals get kicked out into the streets with your children, right? They're protected. They're fine. They're going to be fine. They are protected. They're going to ensure they're protected because right now the National Guard is probably going to be there till the fall. That's insanity. They've already spent over $500 million keeping the National Guard inside Washington, D.C., the people's house. This is the people's, right? This is the capital of the United States of America. It belongs to the American people. But this is not what this administration wants. And what we're seeing now with ICE, what we're seeing now with the policies being established by the Biden administration, I can tell you this. I've been on the phone with ICE officials, with Border Patrol agents that work on the Texas, U.S.-Mexico border, Arizona, Mexico border. I have friends in California, officials that I know out there that are working, along the Tijuana estuary all the way down through Campos, California, San Diego area. And there is a huge problem. And that is that the policy changes. All these executive orders, I believe there's 9 that Biden has now changed, are creating this shockwave through Central America, through Mexico. It's like a massive earthquake of false information that is spreading right through, reverberating all the way through Central America into South America. And by the way, across the globe, because one of the policies that Biden administration has changed, that President Biden wants changed, and he tries to say it's this anti-Muslim immigration law by President Trump. It's not. This doesn't have to do with being Muslim. This has to do with nation states like Syria, like Libya, like Yemen, and others that have really terrible governments that are falling apart, and they cannot vet their own people. That means that in the country that the people are in, they cannot be vetted. Some of these nation states have problems with terrorism. They can't be controlled, right? So you can't vet your own people. So if they're leaving and they're traveling, they don't have papers on them, they're coming to the United States, they're going to go through, they have before. They'll come through Central America, pay $16,000. I don't know if you all remember this, but I actually was in Texas on the Sean Hannity show, and I was down at the U.S.-Mexico border, and there were 2 men crossing the Rio Grande area that I was at illegally. I was there by myself with a couple of, I was with a cameraman and 2 guys from the Border Patrol and one gentleman whose property we were on. He was a resident there in Texas. And I saw these 2 men crossing, and they obviously were illegal. They were coming across illegally. I thought they were Spanish. I started talking to them, and no, they weren't. They weren't Spanish. They weren't from Mexico. They were from a nation of special interest. Now, they might have been good guys, but they were from a country, a nation of special interest, and that is a fact. It happens quite often. It happens quite often. We have people coming across the border from other parts of the world. And now we see this, where they're like going to kick loose criminals into the United States of America. Folks, the only people winning here are the criminals. And this was on Friday. Homeland Security officials announced also that they will begin to allow 25,000 migrants to remain in Mexico as their cases go through the U.S. So they're going to take 25,000 people, bring them into the United States starting on February 19th. And I want to tell you something. The stories that I've told you about people coming through that border without the appropriate paperwork, without, being able to vet them, that's a fact. That isn't something that I'm just saying. That isn't something that we're just making up. That's something that's very real. That's the problem that we've been having with immigration and customs enforcement officers coming out and blowing the whistle and saying, look, we can't even vet these guys. We've got people that can't even tell where they're actually from. They don't have any paperwork, no documentation on them. Our friend Mario Duarte, I remember when he was talking to me about on our few podcasts ago, was saying, look, Out of the 1,000, 7,000 to 9,000 people that were in that big wave, that big caravan wave in January coming through Guatemala, only 300 applied appropriately with Guatemalan authorities. And of those, 27 were COVID positive. What do you think is happening at that border when you have all these people rushing through, when you have all these people trying to get into the United States, and you have this backwards policy by the Biden administration? It doesn't even make any sense. On the one hand, they're saying, well, we don't have anything in place to bring people in. And then on the other hand, they're saying, wait, we're going to give 25,000 people, migrants entry into the United States. And then we have the Biden administration saying, well, we're going to decide whether or not we're going to allow flights into Florida, or if people should have their documentation in the U.S. to fly domestically, whether or not they've had a COVID-19 test or whether they've been vaccinated. But yet we're going to open our borders and let everybody in no matter what. That's crazy. That's utter insanity. And if you're at the border, and if you've worked along the border the way I have, or if you've talked to Border Patrol agents that have spent their careers on the border, you realize how dangerous it really is. It's very, very dangerous because we don't know who's coming in. For the first time, and this is not about just President Trump. I'm not trying to be a Trumper here, but for the first time, we had a president that actually was going to follow through with policy that not only benefited the United States, but benefited the people that were trying to get into our country. Because you need to have rules and regulations. You need to follow a certain kind of law. It's like when you're with your kids. You're not going to let your kids just do whatever they want. You're not going to have any rules. They're going to get hurt. People are getting hurt at the border because nobody wants to follow the laws that are already on the books. And that's what I'm going to be talking to Congressman Biggs about. I want to hear what he saw at the border. I want to take the next trip that he gets out there. I'd like to go out there with him. I couldn't make it on this last trip. So I want to hear all the details of what he saw. And I also want to play you this clip before we go to him. This is me. This is an interview I did with Glenn Beck when I worked at the Blaze in 2014. I want to show you how it's the same problems over and over and over again.
Believe there's something going on in Central America and with the Mexican government at this point in time. What it is, I don't exactly know. And like you, I've heard the same, that there are commercials, there's news reports about how the United States is taking people in, particularly people with children, and they're not deporting them. There's also this word of mouth. It's a movement by fire. I spoke just moments ago to the Border Patrol Union representative, Derek Hernandez. And what he says he's seeing and what he's hearing from the folks inside the detention facilities is that there's this rapid talk throughout Honduras, throughout Guatemala, throughout El Salvador and Mexico about how the U.S. administration is not deporting anyone, and particularly people with children. So what we're seeing now is this crisis, which began about 2 months ago. And if you go back 8 months and to now, there's about 47,000 plus children that have migrated into the United States.
So 47,000 children. By the way, I had a really good tan then because I was like at the border. Spent a lot of time there. And I actually ran into so many children, and that was during the Obama administration. And this is when they had to build the facilities to house the kids. They didn't even have them. And there were so many children. I remember I was down there and there was one group that came down. It was all of these children, and most of them were teenagers. There were a few that were around maybe 10, 11 years old. There was a young girl in the group that I had believed, based on what I had been told, had been raped. It was a tragic situation, and it was because of policy. It was because of bad policy. And these drug cartels took advantage of this. These human trafficking organizations took advantage of this. This is not just stuff that we're making up here. The only people that are making anything up is the administration right now. That's it. They're telling you these big stories about how they want people to feel bad, right? You feel bad. I get it. I feel bad. I don't want to see people suffer. Nobody wants to see people suffer. We are probably one of the most gracious nations on planet Earth, if not the most gracious nation. We give so much of ourselves. We care so much for other people. I am telling you that the administration right now, the Biden administration, what happened under the Obama administration, the failures under the Bush administration to not take care of these problems at the border by enforcing the laws that are already on the books, by telling companies that hire illegals inside the United States, if you hire an illegal immigrant, if you allow people who are not vetted to work at your facility, you will be fined and you will pay a price for that. But they don't do that. They rarely do that. And they're rarely enforcing the laws that are already on the books. And you know who pays the price for it? American people, the people that are trying to get into our country, the migrants who are suffering and who are being taken advantage of. And guess what? Our federal law enforcement agents who are being told to do a job publicly, but then behind the scenes, their hands are being tied behind their backs. That is what is going on here. It's the same old story, and it's getting more and more dangerous every day. And that's why I have Congressman Andy Biggs. He's with the 5th District of Arizona. He's on the chairman of the House Freedom Caucus. Amazing. He's with a new co-chair with the new Border Security Caucus. He is the new ranking member on the House Judiciary Subcommittee on Crime, Terrorism, and Homeland Security. There's nobody better at laying this issue out than Congressman Andy Biggs. Congressman Biggs, thank you so much for being on the Sara Carter Show. I know you just returned from the U.S.-Mexico border. I don't know if you had a chance to read my op-ed actually at Fox News regarding the border, but I'll send it to you if you haven't. But a lot of it has to do with what you're discussing, the incentives that are being presented by the Biden administration's executive orders, basically 9 executive orders to undo everything that was done during the Trump administration. Tell me a little bit about what you saw down there.
Well, so Sarah, by the way, I did read your op-ed. It was great, and we need to keep pushing that narrative because I don't think enough people really realize yet what's about to happen. So what we saw is we went.
Thank you.
And we saw a lot of places that had new fence along the Arizona-Mexico border, and that's really powerful because you also see immediately when Biden came in and stopped building. You could see where we had our people had been, they had dug the infrastructure. So you had roads there. They had taken down some of the barbed wire fencing that was there. So now there's no fencing there at all in some of these places.
So it's just kind of like a wide open space. I don't think people understand, like you explain it very well. When you take down the barbed wire, when you take down the fencing, it's like a balloon effect. And there's so much contraband. And even where the rivers are, even if it's a small river, they'll build bridges. These drug cartels will literally build these makeshift bridges so that they could bring their trucks over into the United States. We don't even know what's inside them. Human beings have lost their lives in some of these back of these vehicles, you know, where they lock them in, human trafficking source. So explain a little bit about that.
Yeah. So right now, human trafficking and drug trafficking is increasing through different areas of the border. And Sarah, I just don't understand this notion that to open the border is humane when, quite frankly, you see more humans trafficked when you open the border, when you don't stop that. Because when you stop the border, what happens is the cartels are a lot more careful. They have to be, fewer people are going to try to get across. And the fewer the people that try to get across, the more humane it is. Because quite frankly, to the cartel, people are merely product. That's what they are. They're just product. And so they don't care whether they live or die. They're gonna abuse them along the way and bring them forward. And so when we see when we see the cartel there, they control the southern half of the border. Mm-hmm. They control everybody that's coming across, whether they're legit commercial business or whether they're legit people coming across. They're controlling that. And so when you provide incentives to come illegally, what you do is you increase human trafficking and human misery and the toll on people that are coming across. It's basically putting your head in the sand if you don't think that's the case.
I absolutely agree. I want to play you a clip. This is Mario Duarte, is the former head of intelligence for Guatemala, a good friend of mine. He was on the show several weeks ago. I traveled with him in Guatemala at least 3 times over the last several years. And I've been able to see firsthand a lot of these caravans as they've come across Honduras. I want you to hear what Mario Duarte, this is somebody from Guatemala, has to say and how he agrees with you, what has to say about human trafficking and human suffering. Take a listen to this.
About that there are people using these poor individuals as a political statement, as a private picketing army. In my book, that could be even called genocide, manipulating these people actually because they know they'll die. A lot of them will die, on the trip. To me, that's genocide because they are targeting a specific group of people from a specific country. So those people organizing it should be looked at, investigated very harshly. And they are not only in Honduras, not only in Guatemala, not only in Mexico. A lot of them are in the United States. There's also a lot in Europe and other countries. And a lot of them are unfortunately hidden inside multilateral agencies as well.
He's saying a lot without saying a lot. And the suffering of these people, when we don't stick to the rules or to the laws, we perpetuate this criminal behavior. We become accomplices to this. And I think that's what he's saying.
Right. And so when he starts talking about multilateral institutions, I usually mention that the NGOs have started advertising again. You've seen it down there, Sarah. These are NGOs based out of the U.S. getting UN money or U.S. Money, and they're putting up ads in Mexico and the Northern Triangle states and saying, come on, we'll put you in a caravan. We'll get you across the border. Cartels advertise as well down there. And when you see that, he's right. Because we know that there's going to be a lot of people who die. We don't know the number of people who actually die. But we do know that there's tremendous human suffering along the way. And I think I'm quite frankly, I'm always shocked when I hear my colleagues on the other side of the aisle say, look, we just want the humane approach. We just want to treat people like people. We're going to let them in. But all of those incentives will bring thousands of people who otherwise, by the way, Guatemala is losing a generation of capable young male leaders and workers because they're coming up here and they're going to be exploited.
Well, we've seen ghost towns. I was down there. I saw for myself with my own eyes around Volcano Fuego. I was in many different areas of Guatemala where some of the towns were literally abandoned. There were very few families left, very few people left. The incentive was based on lies. I would talk to people on the trips that would tell me, we're heading to America because we're being promised jobs. The government is going to give us jobs. In 2014, I played a clip at the beginning of the podcast. I had actually covered the undocumented minors that were coming in during the Obama administration. And I couldn't begin to tell you the amount of suffering that these children went through, not only when they got into the United States, but on the journey. Rape, pregnancy, STDs, child molestation, abandonment. How can anyone say that this is okay? This is not about bring me your poor and bring me your hungry. These people are literally political footballs in a game between not only the Democrats in the United States, and we've seen what they've done, and even the Republicans. I remember during the Bush administration, I would say, I can't believe this. You can't have an immigration reform package. You can't do immigration reform if the border's wide open and people are still coming into the United States without any checks and balances. Let me ask you this. You were just down there. I know you talk about national security a lot, and you're on the subcommittee. You focus on homeland security and terrorism. One of the issues about the border, and a lot of people don't like to bring it up, but now more than ever, it's a reality. We know it is. I have to wait for the Washington Post to write about it, right? Joby Warrick wrote about Iran and Mexico. Now it's official. I wrote about it 10 years before that, but it wasn't as official then. When you look at the U.S.-Mexico border and you realize all of these executive orders are going through, how dangerous is this situation, not just to the people, not just to the national security, and I'll get into America and how it affects us as Americans, but opening that border up the way they are without proper vetting. to the possibility of bad actors taking advantage of that.
Well, Sarah, you're right. Look, last year, I think the number exceeded 150 different nations. Just 2 weeks ago, they found 11 Iranian folks in Arizona, crossing the border in Arizona. We have people from all over the world coming in. Brazil's a great center where people come into Brazil and then work their way up, and then they cross our southern border. We don't vet these people at all. So here's the way to think of it. If we catch 3,000 people a day crossing the border, we're barely able to vet them. That's just way too many. But we know that we at least one to one, some estimates as high as 3 and 4 and 5 to 1 are getaways. And if that's the case, you have anywhere from 3 to 10,000 people a day practically coming across the border. We have no idea who they are. They could be terrorists. We know that there have been terrorists that have come across before. They can have any kind of disease. I was at Antelope Wells, a year and a half ago, and I was talking right during the surge. I was talking to an official there, and I said, "What diseases have you seen?" He starts going through everything from leprosy to smallpox, and then he says, and then there was a disease where a guy's arm is literally being eaten away by something, bacteria or something, and nobody could ever identify what the disease was. And we're sitting here. They're not doing a rapid test on COVID either down there, Sarah. And the Biden plan is to just catch and release these people back into the United States.
So this is what's so insane about this, right? They're not doing the rapid tests on COVID. I know you're right about that. I've talked to people down at the border. They're saying the exact same thing, but yet the Biden administration is planning on enforcing a law for American citizens to fly domestically that we have to either show that we've been vaccinated or show that we've taken the test and that we're negative. And I don't even know how long they expect people to wait. Like, do you have to take the test the same day and then run down to the airport? Do you have to wait 3 days? It's insane. It's complete insanity. It makes no sense at all. And even to the point where they're threatening Governor DeSantis and the state of Florida and saying, well, we may not allow domestic flights into the Florida. What? You're not going to allow domestic flights into my state? Like, what's going on here? So what is happening? What are the Republicans doing? I know it's tough. This is a tough situation. We've got, Republicans are in the minority now, but what can the Republicans do to fight this?
Well, we have to keep the narrative up, like you're doing and like I'm trying to do, and get it out there as much as we possibly can. We have to get it on the front end because some of these policies haven't fully kicked in yet that Biden's trying to do. We have to, those of us who are in Congress, we've got to throw down speed sticks everywhere we can when they're trying to get legislation to go through to support his plan. We have to.
What are the ones you're most concerned about, Congressman? What are the policies that you think are going to be the most dangerous to our nation as far as immigration?
First of all is the sanctuary city policy. So that's people who are already here. Second thing would be emasculating ICE, which they're trying to do now. So we can't get rid of criminals and criminals who are here illegally. They are here illegally. They've committed a crime here or before they got here. The third thing is the incentive. So the refugee package where they're dumbing down the vetting process for refugees, asylum seekers. They're not putting any apparatus in there. They're going to get back to this point where you come in, you claim asylum, and away you go. You're going to get a piece of paper, come back in 2-3 years, and we'll never see them again. As you know, it's only that the slow-witted 8% who actually show up. The other 92% are too clever to show up for the asylum hearings because they also know that there's going to be amnesty. So the ultimate big, if I can say this, big enchilada. I don't know if you can say this, but anyway, the big enchilada that they're looking at is amnesty. Because I love
enchiladas; those are great.
Me too. that is really what this is all about. So when you get amnesty in there, so all these policies that I've just iterated, everybody believes in amnesty. So I used to talk to people, why did you come? Well, I came because DACA was a big lure. And now nobody, so you know this and I know this, there were 600,000 or so on the original DACA that were left that had qualified, that had applied.
Correct.
Then, but that ended 8-10 years ago. Mm-hmm. So since that time, you've had literally several million people that would otherwise be similarly situated. And they're going to say, well, we can't leave them out. So they're going to they're going to extend a DACA type program to them. And I've never met a DACA kid. Well, I shouldn't say that. I met one kid one time who said he didn't want his mom to receive citizenship or a path to citizenship as well and be forgiven. Everybody else says, I want my parents, I want my siblings, I want my aunts and uncles, my relatives, I want them all to come in. That is explosive. And those are incentives to come into this country illegally. The point I'm trying to make to you ultimately is we have a surge about ready to happen, like we had in 2019. And the last point here, and I'm really, this is already, in my opinion, this is almost already de facto happened. MPP is gone, but Title 42, which said because during the COVID crisis, it was an emergency and you could just turn people away. Already we were turning away more people on a monthly basis who came in during the surge, the highest months ever. That's what we have. That's what we're facing. And if we don't talk about it, if we can't elevate this, and by the way, at the same time this is going on, you've got Republicans in the House and the Senate that want to go together with Democrats to put together a Gang of Eight style immigration amnesty bill. And so I find myself just, you can see I have hardly any hair left, but if I did, I'd be pulling it out, Sarah. I'd be pulling it out.
So let's talk about that for a second. Well, two things I want to talk about. The Gang of Eight, putting together this Gang of Eight package without having any of our ducks in a row, with basically just overturning everything and then this is what happened during the Bush administration. I saw this and I was constantly down at the border. And every time I went down there, it was me, Jerry Sieper, who was with the Washington Times. And there were a couple of other reporters, one from Reuters. And I remember Congress kept holding hearings. And this is what I heard. I heard that Bush was so mad at me, that they were so mad that they were like, who is this Sara Carter from the Daily Bulletin? Because I was breaking all these stories and Congress kept having to hold hearings and they couldn't pass immigration reform. So it was like a few of us working the border, to bring the truth to the American people. Not because I don't want more immigrants. My mother was an immigrant from Cuba. She came here legally, right? She came here legally. But between that issue and the Gang of Eight and this, 25,000 people that they're going to issue, to bring into the United States, the Biden administration, even though they've told, apparently, it's like this weird juxtaposition of a statement. We're not ready to bring all these people in, but we're going to give 25,000 amnesty. And then we're hearing from Immigration and Customs Enforcement that they were asked to kick people onto the streets. Even child molesters, even drug dealers. And guess what? I don't believe that story. I don't believe the story completely. I don't believe that they were actually not released. I've actually been told by people that there were people released from the prisons and kicked out onto our streets that were drug dealers, that were child molesters, that it actually happened. So I have an issue with that. I have an issue with that because no American would be treated like that. Right. And certainly we wouldn't want that.
No, Sarah, that's exactly right. And I'm with you. I am certain that there have been really bad criminals, violent, who have been released onto our streets. And why do we know that? Because we know that during the sanctuary city movement, they were kicking people out left and right. Mm-hmm. And so we know that that's happened. We know it's going to happen. We know that's part of the leftist belief system on this thing, and what it boils down to is we need you and others to write stories constantly. We need to be able to raise these issues on the floor of the House. I tell you what else we need. We need state legislatures and state attorneys general to be involved in this, because they're going to have to. I mean, that's why I like what has been done in Texas. They're trying to take whatever.
Ken Paxton, Attorney General Ken Paxton's doing an incredible job. Yeah,
they're taking whatever authority they can after the Arizona v. U.S. case, which basically was decided wrongly, in my opinion. But that whatever field that the feds have abandoned, the state attorneys generals and also the legislatures need to occupy. And I would tell you what we see in some of the border sheriffs in Arizona. We have some border sheriffs who basically work with our county attorneys, which is like a district attorney in most places. And what they will do is that if somebody comes into the country illegally, and let's say that they're a mule, they're carrying drugs or something like that, or there's human trafficking or something like that, there are state-based charges that they can go with. The U.S. attorney is not going to take those cases, but the county attorneys can take those cases, the district attorneys, and they can prosecute those cases. There's one county in Arizona, I think they have 100% conviction rate. And
that's incredible.
Yeah. And so what they're doing is that they're trying to do that. That's what we have to have as a backup. Yet there are state crimes. We need prosecution of those crimes because, look, an attorney, U.S. attorney is not going to prosecute a case unless somebody's got, I think the number is now 400 pounds of pot, and they got to have it on their back. And the CBP agent has got to see them with that. And they probably want a confession.
They make it almost impossible. They make it impossible for anybody to follow the law, but yet they'll take our kids off the streets of Baltimore, off the streets of Phoenix, off the streets of Washington, D.C. They'll prosecute them to the full extent of the law, put them in jail, throw away the key forever. And, I remember the whole 3 strikes you're out bit in the past too. Yeah. I mean, President Trump was the first president that said, let's change this. Let's change this all the way around. But you got drug dealers and mules and people being abused by these human traffickers that are getting like a little slap on the wrist. On the wrist. What is it with the Gang of 8 then? What is it with our Republicans that are willing to concede to the Democrats? I mean, because I think there's a lot of people out here that are like, wait a minute, if my kid gets killed by somebody that should have been put out of our country. I know the argument from the left is, but not all immigrants are bad. You're right. Not all immigrants are bad. Not all Americans are bad. But if somebody's child dies because somebody decided to not put a criminal back, deport them back to their nationality, back to their home country. I mean, what is the answer here? How is it possible that Republicans are going to jump on board with the Democrats on this?
Well, I'm praying that they don't. I mean, because everything you said is exactly right. I mean, look, you and I both could give people all kinds of stories. There's two little boys that they found that had been repeatedly used and basically sold to be the children for ostensible parents. So these kids could come in as a family. These single males could come in as a family with a kid, and then they would be cited and released over and over again. I mean, that was the one of the cases they found out of Yuma. I mean, so that's going on. We know that's going on, and there is no rationale behind this because they're going to let this cite and release thing, this idea that you're going to emasculate ICE. Right. I just don't understand the leftist mindset or even the Republican mindset who agrees with this, that says, you know what, we're going to treat people who come into this country illegally and commit a crime better than we're going to treat U.S. citizens. And here's the other thing that just blows my mind. We let in about 2 million people legally every year. And all of a sudden, we want to say we're going to put everybody who's come into this country the wrong way. We're going to put them ahead of the people who've done everything they possibly can. I've got friends. You've got friends. I have friends that have immigrated legally from countries like Mexico or Guatemala, and it's taken them 12, 13 years to obtain citizenship in this country. And on the other hand, we're going to say, look, if you came across the wrong way, and they're going to, they've already said this, we're not going to count all these crimes that you may have committed against you. We're going to take a look at them. If it's DUI, they said petty assault. Look, I've tried petty assault cases as a prosecutor and a defense attorney, and some of those petty assault cases ain't so petty.
That's right. And sometimes they lower the charges. I don't think people realize this, that sometimes they capture someone, moving drugs, a certain amount of drugs, and then they'll charge them with trespassing instead of a drug charge, or, they're drunk driving, disorderly conduct. But what you see isn't really what happened. So I totally agree with you on that. Is there something that as regular citizens, what can they do? Contact their state congressional members, contact their state legislatures, write in to their state senators. What can they do to ensure that maybe their voices are being heard? This is going to be a tough time.
Yeah, so I think I can say "fight on" this station without on your podcast without getting
that's right.
censored. No, you gotta have to fight on and rhetorically fight on. And the way you do that, governors have to be contacted, mayors have to be contacted, attorneys generals have to be contacted, state representatives and senators have to be contacted. Your U.S. congressmen and the U.S. senators have to be contacted. Everybody has to be hearing from you on a regular basis. And if we can build that groundswell up, we need the conservative coalitions. We need the groundswell people. We need Turning Point USA. All of these groups that have massive followings need to be speaking out loud and with one voice saying no, because we saw what happened. You participated in the Gang of Eight time by shining light on it. It really when it just basically collapsed it. Don't forget that most Americans, we want a secure border. That's what rocketed President Trump in 2016 in that campaign to the top. I'll just tell you I got to tell you one last anecdote because it's kind of funny.
Okay, I'm going to let you, and then I'm going to ask you one funny last question. It's not going to be funny, it's serious, but it's like a totally different subject. I'm going to see what you think about it because I am so fascinated by it. But go ahead, you first.
Okay. So about 10 years or so ago, in Arizona we passed SB 1070, right? Mm-hmm. And what that was is you basically you couldn't get benefits if you were here in the country illegally. Now that makes some sense. And we can enforce state laws against you. And of course that ended up going to the US Supreme Court and people said it got overturned. But actually the number one thing was if there was probable cause, an officer could say to you, are you a US citizen? You have to have probable cause. So the court said, yeah, that's it. That was 1070. Anyway, so about that time, I wrote a book about illegal immigration. And it was very detailed, including everything from La Raza to critical race theory. I thought it was just like this primer on all things on immigration, particularly illegal immigration. And I give it to an agent, and he's reading it, and he says, "Oh, this is a really interesting book, Andy. This is fantastic. This is very informative. A lot of people should read this book." And he said, "But we can't get it placed." I said, "Well, you can't get it placed. How come?" He says, "Nobody will buy a book about illegal immigration." And what's interesting, about 6 months later, Jeb Bush came out with a book on illegal immigration, and my agent was right. Nobody bought his book either. Nobody will buy a book about illegal immigration. And even though it's one of the biggest issues of the time. Now, of course, Ann Coulter came along later on with a book about illegal immigration. She sold tons of copies. But the reality is people know this is a real issue. They feel it intuitively. They know it intellectually. But the left cows them and says, if you want secure borders, if you want people to immigrate legally, then you are inhumane. And we get back, and so they make everybody feel like they're guilty. But the reality is what you and I have been talking about, and that's this. It is the other side that wants open borders. They are the ones that have very promiscuous, inhumane policies. And that's where we need to draw the line.
I absolutely agree with you. And I think that this is a humanitarian crisis. It's a crisis of our time. And if we really care about human trafficking and the suffering of children and the suffering of people, we will not perpetuate this kind of behavior. I am right on board with you on that. I mean, I think you can't be more humane than to say that. We are going to stop you from building your coffers off of the backs and deaths of human beings. That's what the cartels are doing. They're killing our children with drugs, and they're killing the people coming up to this country in these caravans without any kind of proper security, and young children traveling alone, and pedophilia and everything horrific that you can imagine these children have experienced. And I think if people really care, if you all really care, Democrats, if you're even listening to my podcast, I don't even know. But if anybody, even Republicans, if you care, you'll stop it. Now, my last question, because this is cool. Okay. Right? So big thing for me is all the Pentagon's new studies on the unidentified aerial phenomena. This is a big deal. Okay. This is a really big deal. Pentagon, has a program, and they're releasing documents. The CIA and others are apparently going to be releasing documents in 120 days, revealing what they have been monitoring and watching in the skies. I've had Luis Elizondo on the show multiple times. He headed the Pentagon's program. Now it's being headed by others. I've spoken briefly by email with Chris Mellon, who from the Mellon family. He's also, was with the Pentagon, with the Defense Department, well-respected man who was also pushing for disclosure. What are your thoughts on disclosure? And I hear there's a lot of people within the intel committees that have been briefed on this. How important do you think it is for America to know? Should we know? And what the heck is going on? I mean, like, if you ever see any kind of unidentified aerial vehicles flying over Arizona, other than the ones from the drug cartels that are trying to bring in
the drones,
the drones, I expect you to come on my show and talk about it. But what do you think about this?
Well, Arizona is actually kind of a hotbed for sightings of unidentified objects,
Yes,
flying
it is.
objects, and we've had a history of it right over the Phoenix metro area. There's been supposed sightings. I'll just say supposed sightings because I didn't see it. But
Right.
I think that it would be fascinating to release these things. I'm a big believer in transparency. First of all, if we were transparent as a government, then I think we as a people would quit relying on emotions to drive a lot of our decision making.
Right.
We would go by intellect and logic. I think that's important. Number one. Number two, if we saw how much money the government spends and all kinds of things, some absolutely having no value at all, others may have some tremendous value that we just don't know anything about. Unless it's really absolute national security spying type things, and even then, we should probably, within a certain period of time, release that. I would suggest that it's great to have that out there and be transparent, because then America can say, our government's simply too big and we need to ratchet down the size of it. And then we'd have more freedom in the country. We'd have more information in the country. I think we'd have more rationality in the country. And I think all those things would be really terrific for the United States of America.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that, whether it's about disclosure, whether it's a process, whether we're alone in the universe, whether our government is actually monitoring something they can't explain, and people talk about this. Could this be something from another country, a technology that we're not familiar with? That's also a possibility. Whatever it is, I think, I've talked to Luis Elizondo, I've talked to others at the Pentagon about this, and people also connected to Space Force. It's this is a very serious question. I think, in this day and age, you really can't hide anything from anyone. Everybody's got a cell phone. Everybody has the capability to, for themselves, to make their own decisions. So I think, like, you're right. I think we've come to a point where the American people, and I think always have been at that point, government needs to be honest with them. So thank you so much for answering that. And I'll keep you posted on anything I hear.
I didn't know I was coming on the X-Files. Okay. I was surprised.
Yes. Yes. So, I'm telling you, I focus on that at least once a month or every other week, and I bring experts on to talk about it. So if it wasn't at the Pentagon, I probably wouldn't do it, but it's a very serious issue. And actually Tucker Carlson does a great job on his show, in exposing it as well. So, thank you. It is. It's important. We want to know the answers, but first let's stick with what's on the ground. And that's people here in America and immigration and protecting our country and protecting people that are being brought here illegally. Thank you so much, Congressman.
Thank you, Sarah. Good to be with you.
Okay, I had to throw in the question. About the UFOs, about the unidentified flying objects. I'm hearing that a lot of people are being briefed on this. And one of the reasons why I brought this up was a big story that actually came out. And it was first reported by The Sun. And it was The Sun online. You can go there. It's thesun.com. It's called Stunning Admission. We also published it at saracarter.com. Stunning Admission. Pentagon admits it has been testing wreckage from UFO crashes, and findings may change our lives forever. This is huge. A researcher, Anthony Bragalia, wrote to the Defense Intelligence Agency. He was requesting details of all UFO material which they hold and the results of any tests they had been carrying out on it. And so this researcher said this could include physical debris recovered by personnel of the Department of Defense as residue. We've heard about all these stories, right? Going all the way back to New Mexico, the Roswell incident, everything. People say, oh, it's conspiracy theories. Is it true? Is it true? Is it not true? And I always hated when reporters laughed about it, like really laughed about it, and made fun of people who said they saw something, because I thought it was our job as reporters to always ask those questions. Like, unless someone's totally off the rocker, I mean, if we see something, if there's something out there, we should investigate it, like what happened in Chicago with the sighting in Chicago years back. So this story is very important because the DIA released basically 154 pages of test results that include reports on the mysterious memory metal. It's called nitinol. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. It apparently unfolds and folds back into its original shape. It's apparently a type of element that is not here on the planet Earth, or something that we don't have, that they were studying. And Bragalia said it was a stunning admission from the U.S. government, and the documents reveal that some of the retrieved debris possesses extraordinary capabilities, including the potential to make things invisible or even slow down the speed of light. That's very interesting, because I want you to think about, like, what if you've heard all the other shows where we've talked to Luis Elizondo, right, and his work at the Pentagon, and some of the things, those variables that they were looking at when they were studying these, they call them unidentified aerial phenomena now, is the fact that sometimes they appear to be invisible. Like, I mean, you could barely see them and they get picked up on the radar. So I think this is a time where people are taking this seriously. You heard Congressman Biggs. I mean, I think people are still a little bit nervous about talking about it. It's not something that people are completely comfortable with. I am. I'm comfortable with it. I want to know. I'm not going to be one of those people that's going to ignore, something right before their face. These were FOIAs. These are Freedom of Information Act documents. You can actually see them. Go to SaraACarter.com. Take a look at these. These are from the Defense Intelligence Agency. This isn't, some kind of made up story. This is not an Onion thing. This is a serious issue. It could change the way we see ourselves and our existence forever. It makes me have a stronger faith. I like the idea of knowing that I'm not alone, or the possibility that I'm not alone in this vast universe. And I have some kind of comfort in thinking of how much we're going to evolve in the years to come, scientifically. I mean, the extraordinary things that my future family members will see. What will the world be like? It's very exciting to me to think about things like that. I'm a little bit of a nerd. And I love those thoughts. I love to think of what we can do as human beings, the good things we can do, the extraordinary things we can achieve together. Imagine how far we've come in the last 100 years. My gosh, even in the last 50 years. We've gone from horse and buggy to flying, to going to the moon, to sending ships to Mars. So anything is possible. I like to leave you on that high note. Think about things that make us feel positive. Realize that if we do our bit, we can actually affect change. We can actually make a difference in the world, right? We can make a difference for our family, for our children, for our friends, for our neighbors, for our country, and possibly even for aerial phenomena. We can actually be living in one of the coolest times in human history. Think about that. Anyways, it was great being with you. I always love you being here. Remember, at the Sara Carter Show, we love to read your reviews. We want you to join us. Please download the show wherever you get your podcasts, right? Whether that's Apple, Spreaker, Spotify, I don't care. Watch us on YouTube. Watch this on Rumble. We bring you guests nobody else will bring. We talk about things nobody else is willing to talk about. And I'm not afraid. Let's put it all on the line. Let's talk. Let's talk about it. The most important thing we can do is report the truth and talk about it. Remember, you can get all your links to the Sara Carter Show at SaraACarter.com. That's SaraACarter.com. Thank you again for joining me. Remember, folks, we are taking the story back, and God bless.